but I am going to say for the record that I believe that you and the governor have taken the unallotment statute far too far. And in fact, I believe it is going to be necessary for the legislature to change the law next year to modernize the unallotment law in accordance with what other states do. No one, I think, could have imagined before this point that a governor would veto a balanced budget bill in order to go unilaterally and go it alone in balancing this budget. And so I think it's very necessary at this point to put on the record that there will be a bill. There already have been 2 bills introduced, but I believe there will be a bill that legislators bipartisanly can hopefully support. So this never happens again, whether the governor is a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. This has been a move that I believe is out of step and illegal in many aspects. We will maybe never know if it is not challenged in court. But I do think the legislature must retain the power the legislature has to change the law. And I think it is necessary to say that at this point, that it is absolutely imperative that the legislature curb the power of a chief executive in terms of infringing on the legislative powers of the state. I, for one, believe in a democracy. I believe in a democracy with 3 strong branches of government, and I believe that the governor's actions impinge on the legislative branch and, in fact, actually weaken the relationship between the executive-legislative branch relationship. And so I, for one, will be a strong sponsor and will be encouraging all of my colleagues to vote for changes in the unallotment law going forward, because I think many of us believe bipartisanly that this has gone way too far.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker, that's on, how we discuss and change the law is an issue for the next legislative session. As far as going at it alone, I think the governor has been very clear and was very clear when we introduced our budget in January what our preference was, and that we weren't going to raise taxes, and that we wanted to reprioritize and how we wanted to solve the budget. We had ideas to mitigate some of these cuts that you rejected. We did this in midweek before the final Monday, and you chose to go ahead anyway, and in the last 8 minutes of the legislative session in both bodies, in an untransparent manner, roll right over both minorities and pass your balanced budget that passed in the last 8 minutes of a 5-month legislative session. I don't think...
Madam Speaker.
Well, Commissioner, thank you for rewriting history for everyone in the room. The fact of the matter is, the only thing that had never been passed to the governor before the final night of session was the school shift. Every single other thing had been passed to the governor ahead of time. Oh, with the exception of the business tax cuts that were included in the bill, which had passed both bodies. There is no truth to your statement, no truth to your statement at all. This is a governor who on the Thursday before the end of session stood up and declared he had made a decision to unallot himself. It is quite different than the previous 2 sessions, one where we had a surplus and one where we had a deficit, where we spent inordinate amounts of time with this governor. The governor disengaged. The governor disengaged early. It is accurate and it is truthful. The legislature passed a balanced budget. The governor chose to veto the balanced budget. Commissioner, how many other states have been in this situation and decided to raise taxes this year?
Madam Speaker, before I get to that question, I said you didn't pass a balanced budget till the final 8 minutes. You passed other budget bills. And if you go back...
Well, I think, Commissioner,
no.
thank you.
I think you were editorializing, Commissioner, about transparency.
Am I going to get interrupted, Mr. Chairman, the whole time whenever I speak? Or am I going to be allowed to speak? What I'm saying is...
Commissioner, you may have a lot of power, but you can't tell the chairman of a committee how to run the committee. Now, you will have an opportunity to speak.
I was
But
speaking.
by the time this meeting's over, Commissioner, you will not only have been treated fairly, but you will have been treated honestly. Madam Speaker first, then the Commissioner.
Commissioner, if our quibble is about when the bill was passed, let's be very clear. The rules of the House are made to be used to govern, not to gum up the works. I have experienced the minority twice in my tenure as Speaker as trying to gum up the works by the use of the rules at the end of a session. The only piece of the balanced budget that had not previously been passed to the governor was the school shift. That is the only piece. Everything else, how we cut deeper in the general fund budget than the governor and passed and the governor signed into law, that is a fact. How we worked with your commissioners to use the one-time money appropriately from the federal government, that is a fact. That we passed to the governor of the state, the chief executive of the state, a balanced budget by our constitutionally appointed midnight deadline on the last day of a session, that is a fact. You may have an opinion about how that looked, but the minority shares a role in how that looked as well by their behaviors and actions.
Okay, Commissioner.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker, if you look back at and I was standing there on that day when the governor made his announcement that this was a possibility, that unallotment. I mean, you look back at what he said, it wasn't he didn't make the decision then. It was only made after the legislative session concluded. We still were trying to negotiate, but we were making it clear the ramifications of not coming to an agreement in those final 5 days.
Madam Speaker.
Commissioner, you are allowed to tell yourself whatever you believe. That is not the facts, though. The facts are that I wrote a letter to the governor within moments of his press conference asking him to detail the detail of the unallotment offer. He wrote me a very brief one-paragraph letter back that has a very clear sentence in it, Commissioner, and I will have it brought over right now. That sentence was, "This is not an offer, this is a decision."
When
Okay.
session,
Commissioner, then we're going to move on.
All right, Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker, it was a decision that we weren't going into special session, and we had to conclude by that Monday. That's what I remember it as being.
Well, it's, you know, with all due respect to the executive branch, you don't have all of those powers, but let's move on.